Alrighty, so tonight's beginning the series is building off of what we just studied, who is man. Tonight the question is, who am I? Who am I? Who are you? How would you answer that question? This lesson is about that perennial question. So let's talk about this. Who am I? Why is this controversial? Or is it? Is it controversial at all? Is this a answer to this question or this question at all? Is it basic, simple, controversial, not? Keith? Okay. So the answer to this question right now is exactly what we've been talking about in the stuff that we did with cultural Marxism, which seeks to divide you into your constituent groups and as to many slashes as possible. This, and this, and this, that's how I identify as to who I am. So, any other thoughts or responses to why this is controversial about the answer to the question, who am I? So you're talking about aspects of your identity like your nationality, your skin color, your sex, your gender, which are two different things now, which is crazy. Okay, so that's another question. Yeah, so if we ultimately answer the question, it's kind of like we were talking about. There's two major worldviews out there today, a naturalistic worldview that would say that we are evolved and descended from primates and apes. And so that's the answer to that question is huge. In fact, that's if you were to separate the worldviews into two major camps, I mean, it comes out a little differently, but especially in Western culture right now, materialism, naturalism, atheism, the things we talked about this morning, remember about primitive man in fire? No, still not going to do it. Yeah. That whole mindset about evolution and how man evolved and all that kind of stuff, that's one camp. And then another camp would be what we would call where we're created by a creator. So let's talk about this question. And I have here that I believe that this is the answer to cultural Marxism. To the ideology that's out there today, it's based in those understandings which removes being created, which removes authority, right? So if we are created by a creator that is involved with his creation, then we are subject to that creator. And so one of the goals of a worldview that is such as cultural Marxism is to remove any kind of ultimate authority, turn it from an objective state of affairs to a subjective state of affairs. And I read a quote in the Restoration Herald. How many of you know what the Restoration Herald is? Okay. All right. There may be some of you who are like, I don't even know what you're talking about. And that's a failure on my part. The Christian Restoration Association, the CRA, has a monthly magazine that comes out called the Restoration Herald. And people, they have regular writers for it, and then they have guest writers, and they have lessons in there and all this kind of stuff. And I really want to start getting that into more of our homes and people's hands. I want to encourage you to look into subscribing. I mean, it's dirt cheap. I mean, it's so cheap to get a year's worth. You can get it digitally and all sorts of stuff. So I really want us to look at that. But I saw a quote in there in one of the articles, and I'm going to sum it up the best that I can, is that when you remove God as the source of objective authority, then it just boils down to who's your favorite human. And I was like, wow, that is super powerful, because that just boils down to what human authority are we placing our trust in? And so I'm going to find that quote and give it, but that just really hit me. And so we're going to talk about that here in a little bit. But I really believe this, the answer to this question from a biblical worldview, who is man, and this question about who are you and who am I, answers at a core level, and these understandings are what are going to help us to beat back this ideology that has all those, that breaks us down into our constituent parts and breaks us into groups. So when we do that, we end up with division. Cultures become very divided and angry at one another when we're involved, remember, in this oppressor thing. See, the one thing that we talked about is in cultural Marxism always says that the oppressed will rise up and overthrow the oppressor, and then we'll have utopia. Right? You know what's going to happen? This thing will never end if people look at the world that way, because there will always be an oppressor and the oppressed. It just reverses. So it's a never-ending, and it's an evil mindset. And it's only going to divide people. So we got to figure out a way to answer these questions about who are we, and this is really going to be helpful, I think. So this lesson is about a perennial question that most people ask themselves at one time or another, namely, who am I? Now, it may sound like a silly question, but it is really quite serious and important. Do you really know who you are, and how does one decide? Some think that this is just something you decide for yourself, according to how you feel about it. They think that you are what you feel like you are. You can be whatever you want to be. The solution is to simply construct your own identity. And you see this quote, I identify as, right? That's pretty popular today. We have recently witnessed two prominent controversies stemming from this approach to self-identity. One of our U.S. senators, Elizabeth Warren from Massachusetts, has supposedly claimed to be Native American. The basis for her claim, which has been severely challenged, boils down to this, not a quotation. My mother told me I have Native American ancestors. I feel as if I am Native American, therefore I am Native American. For another example, a former head of the NAACP, Rachel Dolezal, claimed to be black, but turns out to be almost totally of European ancestry. Why did she identify as a black woman? She is quoted as explaining it thus, quote, if you know, I was asked, I would definitely say that yes, I do consider myself to be black. One area where this way of self-identifying has become rather outrageous has to do with gender. It used to be that if you were filling out a form that asked your gender, two choices were given. Circle the M or the F. No longer. For example, if you wanted to apply to take the LSAT, the law school admission test, you have 12 gender choices. If you want to fill out the application to join the Facebook community these days, it is reported that you have 71 choices. 71 gender choices. One website I checked that lists possible gender identities that has 48 choices under the letter A. Another common approach to self-understanding is based on name meanings. This always seemed to be the case among Native Americans. One website says the Cheyenne names, Hoo-hoo, Hivo, Vito, Ata, Missa, Uto, means whirlwind. On a simpler level, there is always Running Bear, who loved Little White Dove. I guess all new parents agonize over what names to name their baby. I found a website, quote, called Mom Junction that claims to give meanings for 70,000 names. Dr. Cottrell writes, I know my first name Jack means God is gracious, so I looked up my middle name Warren. It said, no data found, try another name. If you don't trust your feelings or the name game, you can always send some saliva to one of the companies that will analyze your DNA. There are quite a few. I've seen ads from Ancestry and 23andMe for a price usually about $100 and up. They will tell all your main ancestral origins. Example, one can be 8% Spanish, 17% Greek, 12% Chinese, 44% German, and 9% unknown. How fortunate you are to be reading this, because I'm going to save you the money and tell you who you are right now for free. There's just one qualification. I cannot tell you your individual identity, i.e. the things that are true about you specifically and uniquely. Sorry, but I can tell you the identity you share with the whole human race, at least on some things, as well as the identity you share with other Christians. So unless you are an alien from Mars or somewhere, here is your answer to the question, who am I? The first thing is this, the answer to this all-important question: you are 100% created. Created. The first and most important element of your identity is this: you are 100% a creature. A creature, a created being. Now, this is a quality you share with every other human being. There is no exception. Now, regarding this feature, there are just two possibilities. You are either created or not, created or uncreated. Those who claim to be uncreated have just two choices for their ultimate origin of stuff out of which their bodies are made. Their stuff is either eternal, having always existed in some form or another, or it just popped into existence out of nothing purely by accident. Either way, given the existence of physical matter, how did the living matter that became animals spring forth from it? Purely by accident? Then we have to ask, how did consciousness develop within one of these animal forms? Purely by accident? So if you are not created, you have the honor of identifying as this. So if we're hanging on the fact that you are uncreated, is that you're a product of chance and time, and it's from, how's it go? From the goo to you via the zoo, right? Okay? You have the honor of identifying as an accidental blob of matter. That's your identity. The other choice, and the one that is actually true, is that the human race was created by the Almighty Creator of the entire universe. In the very beginning, God created the entire universe. Then over the next span of time, He made it into a comfortable home for the creature that this was all leading up to, man, human beings, the human race. Then when it was ready, He said, let us make man in our image. And then God created man in His own image. Genesis chapter 1, 26 and 27. This is the foundational answer to the question, who am I? I am a creature of God. Now, some may not like this choice because they are turned off by the very word creature. It conjures up the monsters that are common in the old horror movies, the creature from the Black Lagoon. You guys remember that? Now, for some of you youngerins that are in here, it was a big deal when I was a kid. Now, they still have 7-Eleven, right? Yeah, do they? Okay. And they have those kind of stuff. So what they would do is they would advertise, right? You can go get 3D glasses at 7-Eleven, right? You buy a big gulp. This is like in the early 80s or late 70s, early 80s, and you get those paper 3D glasses. What's that? You remember? Did you do this? And then there was going to be broadcast 3D movie on the television, right? And so you'd sit in front of there and you'd put them on and you're like, this is terrible. And I remember it being the creature from the Black Lagoon is one of them, right? And you know, to an 8-year-old, it's cool and creepy all at the same time. But you remember the swamp creature, the creatures that walk among us. So when we talk about that, the word there, forget about that. Don't use the word creature if you just think it's demeaning. Just say, I am a created being. Now, whatever term we use, many people prefer the non-creature answer. Because if we are created beings, therefore having a personal creator, then we have someone who has the right to tell us what to do. and to whom we must answer for our choices. And many, if not most people, have decided that they do not want somebody, especially a divine, all-powerful somebody, trying to tell them what to do. Therefore, to justify their own freedom to do and be whatever they want to do or be, they prefer to be an accidental blob of matter rather than a creature of the all-loving and gracious Creator. Now, having a personal Creator on your papers, then we have someone who has the right to tell us what to do. Now, remember our lesson at the very beginning of our 5-point series that we just completed was on what subject? Anybody remember? The rejection of authority. And so, if we recall, remember our lesson about authority. If we recall that, when we seek an alternative explanation to our origins, I believe, ultimately, at the very base of this, it's a rejection of authority. And that is the motivation. The fact is, however, that the only reasonable choice and the only truly preferable choice is our identity as created beings. Genesis 1 tells us the truth. And it is not just a fact that we are created beings. We should understand that it is a wonderful, awesome, fantastic fact that we have this identity. Also, it is extremely important to know this and to be constantly aware of it. The fact that you are a creature of God is the most important thing you can know about yourself. As created, we have a Creator. We are not here by chance or by accident. As created, we have a boss, or someone who has absolute authority over us, someone who has the right to tell us what to do and to hold us accountable for it. We are not free to do whatever we want to do, including make up our own identity. And as created, we have a purpose for being here. A purpose to live for, namely to glorify our Creator God and to live with Him forever as part of His human family. Now, in the heading of this section, we said that we are 100% created. Now, you're going to find out that the way this is worded is actually an important statement. And you're going to see why, because I think some of us might be thrown for a little bit of a loop tonight. We said that we were 100% created. What is this all about? This is about the fact that as human beings, we are made of two parts: a physical body and a spiritual soul, i.e., a body made of physical stuff and a soul made of spiritual stuff. The latter is often called the spirit. To say that we are 100% created means that both parts of our being, body and soul, are created, made of stuff that at some point was created ex nihilo. You guys remember what that means? Yeah, out of nothing. Great. By the God of the universe. The first human being, Adam, was the fountain from which all the material from which the bodies of subsequent human beings have been made, even that of his wife Eve. Genesis 2:7 tells us where Adam's body came from. Then the Lord God formed man from the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living being. This shows that Adam himself was not a created being directly from nothing, but from the dust of the ground. But where did that dust come from? Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. From what? From nothing. In the final analysis, the physical part of every human being has been created out of nothing by the only one who is capable of such a thing, the Almighty Creator God. Now, you may have heard this story. God was once approached by a scientist who said, "Listen, God, we've decided we don't need you anymore. These days we can clone people, transplant organs, do all sorts of things that used to be considered miraculous." God replied, "Don't need me, huh? How about we put your theory to a test? Why don't we have a competition to see who can make a human being, say, a male human being?" The scientist agrees, so God declares that they should do it like He did in the good old days when He created Adam. Fine, says the scientist, as he bends down to scoop up a handful of dirt, and God says, hey, wait just a minute. Not so fast. You get your own dirt. You get your own dirt. As we have just seen, our physical part has been created out of dirt that was created out of nothing by the only one who is capable of such a thing. Some might object to my use of the word dirt. Our Bible translations say Adam was created from the dust from the ground. Now, this is something I recall, and I've not looked it up recently, but I think that you guys have studied this, can verify this. The actual human body, if it has been studied scientifically, can be broken down to all its components, which are found in the ground. No coincidences. Now, our Bible translations say Adam was created from the dust of the ground. Looked up the Hebrew word translated dust, which is apar. It means dust, loose earth, or soil. When I was growing up, dust is what collected in the house on the furniture. If you picked up a handful off the ground, it was dirt. Folks, our bodies are from dirt. But it was the good, clean dirt that God created. It was much better to be made from God-created dirt than to be nothing more than an accidental blob of stuff. But what about, and here's the real tricky part, what about the human soul? Unless one believes that our souls have been around forever, or that it somehow evolved out of the physical stuff, which a few people do, then it too is the product of divine ex nihilo creation. Does anyone actually believe that the soul is eternal? Yes. Many pagans believe that human souls have existed forever, not necessarily as individual souls, but within or part of some eternal spiritual deity. You ever heard it call it like the one, right? Or this, sometimes they refer to it maybe as a singularity. That they got to get in tune with the one when we talk about pagan religions. This is totally off left field, right? So on our, just talking about how pagan religions and certain religions are working their way into our society in a very familiar way, and it's being very much accepted. Where Christianity, as we talked about this morning, is being further and further pushed away. So we watch our TV on an app called YouTube TV, right? So some of you have like DirecTV or whatever you get your TV from. We have an app. We watch YouTube TV. So the commercials are a little different on there. Every now and then the commercials won't be like a commercial. It'll just be a thing saying, "We'll be back in just a minute." Right? Well, now they've got these ones that are beautiful scenes, like it was a winter scene, and it's like the snow is falling, and at the bottom it says, "We'll be back in a minute. Enjoy the Zen." Enjoy the Zen. Right? You guys know what that is? What is that saying? Yeah, Eastern religions and stuff that enjoy the Zen. What if it said, think it'll ever say one of these days, enjoy God's creation? Now, I believe there was a point in time in our society when it would have said that. Enjoy God's creation. Enjoy the creation. But now it just said, enjoy the Zen, right? So those are just little things like that. That was no extra charge. All right, so we're talking about the soul. Now, I don't know about you, but this is something that we could head off and really dig deep into this, but we're just, for the sake of time, we're not going to. But have you ever thought about this? Is creation ex nihilo still taking place? Okay, you'd say no. Creation out of nothing is still. So we go back to where we said earlier. Do you agree with the statement that we're 100% created, physical and spiritual? Okay, so I'm going to ask the question again. Is creation ex nihilo still taking place? No, I want you to think about this, because this is one of those things that we just kind of take for granted, right? According to my statement, it has to be going. Why?
Because the soul is made for the body.
Okay.
So that soul is not in existence.
So what's the question we're really asking here is, when does the soul come into existence? So at conception, the soul's coming into existence. Have we ever thought about this? Now, this is tongue-in-cheek, but is there some sort of holding place for souls that are waiting to be born? See what I'm saying? Have you ever thought about this? I mean, this is stuff that we just kind of take for granted, because hopefully every true biblical Christian will say that life begins at conception, because we believe then at that point that there's a soul, right? But when did that soul come into existence is the question. And this is actually where we're kind of moving to the deep end of the theological pool, right? I saw a hand. Go ahead.
You said that, are they already like in a holding cell or whatever?
Mm-hmm.
If God knows how many people are going to be on this earth before He ends the earth.
Okay. So God could have already created all the individual souls, and they're just hanging out because He knows, He has omniscience. He knows who's going to. Okay, so we know the Bible tells us about paradise, and that's the intermediate state. So it's interesting to think about. Have I piqued your curiosity a little bit here? Is stuff that we've not really thought much about? Are you saying, is it possible?
No, I'm saying that's what happened.
What? Okay, say it again.
God knows when conception happens.
Sure.
And is God not powerful enough to put the soul at conception?
So surely He's powerful enough to do that. My question is that what happens? And creation ex nihilo then would still be taking place. If that's where we're going to land.
I'm already part of it. I'm loading right now.
It's an interesting thought.
Mm-hmm.
Is there really an answer for it? Do we really should have an answer?
Yeah, I think it's important that we do, because otherwise you have to land in three places. You have to say that souls are eternal. And if you say souls are eternal, then what are we denying? We're denying that we are 100% created. See, there are some that say that the soul is actually that God breathed some of Himself into Adam. Well, if that's the case, then what do we have? We have something that's not created, and that's part created, part uncreated. So we could almost say that it's part God, right? Are we willing to say that? Okay, so this is when you start getting into the real teeth of this is an important question. So most Christians, all right, let's talk about this. Many pagans believe that human souls have existed forever, not necessarily as individual souls, but within or as part of some eternal spiritual deity. Somehow a piece of that deity got separated from the deity itself and became united with physical stuff, and voila, a human being. Christians usually reject such a view as heretical. Most Christians therefore view the origin of the individual soul as an act of creation, either directly or indirectly. The latter view is called transducianism, from Latin terminology involving inheritance. It is the idea that the souls of Adam and Eve were originally created from nothing, but their souls are the offspring or of their offspring are passed along by or inherited from their parents, just the same as the physical body is. So that is one view. Thus, the individual soul is not directly, but indirectly created, since it derives ultimately from Adam and Eve. This view has little or no valid support in Scripture, in my judgment. The other view common among Christians is that the soul of each individual is directly created from nothing at the moment the body is conceived in the mother's womb. The Bible does not specifically say this, and it is difficult to wrap our minds around how this works. But I believe, and I agree with him, that this is the better view. And we know Doug does. He's already parked there. So, we could say that Dr. Cottrell agrees with Doug. Now, one Bible... One Bible text that is usually cited as supporting this view is Hebrews 12:9, which refers to God as the Father of spirits. This understanding of the origin of a human soul would then be analogous to the creation of angelic spirits, i.e., each one individually. Whichever view one takes, the main point is that the soul is created. We cannot move away from that point. The soul is created. If we say it's uncreated, then we're in troublesome heretical waters. The view that the soul is somehow eternal is dangerous for many reasons, but it is even more seriously false when it is based on the idea that the human soul is actually a little part of the eternal deity. Such a view says that your soul shares the divine essence of God and makes you, in a sense, a kind of God. Not good. It is difficult to believe, but this view has been held by many Christians and is derived from the Bible itself. It actually comes from a false interpretation of Genesis 2:7. So, we're not, like I said, we're not going to go into, he goes into a lot of deep view here. Now, you might be surprised to find out that Alexander Campbell actually held on to some of this idea. He said that Campbell wrote, "Lord, what is man? Thine offspring reared out of the dust of earth, inspired with a portion of your own spirit." That gets troublesome. So if we talk about that there is a divinity stirring within him, we got to be careful about that. So anyway, let's move along here. So we understand the most important fact in this whole section is that you are 100% created. Now, let's see what you think about this one. The next section. Okay, so you can see here, you are blank, created in God's image. Right? 100% created in God's image. You are 50% created in God's image. Write it down. Don't be afraid. Write it down. You guys are, I'm not comfortable doing this. You know, I tell Shalana just about every day, you're created in God's image. You are 50% created in God's image. All right, let's talk here. The next part of your identity comes from Genesis chapter 1, 26 and 27, which says this: "Then God said, let us make man in our image, according to our likeness." God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him, male and female, he created them. We learn this from this that we are not only created beings, but are the only created earthly beings who are made in the image of God. This means that every human being is qualitatively different from all other life on this earth. Okay? Qualitatively different from all other life on this earth. We do not have any kind of lineage that puts us on the level of animals. Now, again, if we go with a naturalistic, materialistic viewpoint, right, then what emphasis is placed on our connection to animals? If you come, yes. So we are one, right? We're just basically another animal that's further along in its evolutionary process. So as far as value, if you understand, if you follow their logic out to its conclusion, what is our value in relationship to the rest of animal kind? It's the same. That's why you'll see people weeping over a turtle egg that's destroyed on a beach, but then not really care about abortion. That's why you'll have people that dedicate their whole lives to saving animals because they believe they are one. We're just another animal, and they're just as valuable and as important as we are. Now, does that mean that animals aren't valuable and important in what they were created for? I mean, we all have, I would venture to say that everyone here has had some sort of a special relationship with an animal. We had a hamster named Wicket who bit my mother. She didn't care for him, but bit her right on the cheek. Why she had him up there, I don't know, but he didn't last very long. He went missing. So no, I'm just kidding. He actually got, I know, I made that up. He actually got cancer. Little feller had a tumor. Yeah. Mom cursed him. So, smite thee. But, so let's talk about this a little bit more, that you're 50% created. So, but why do we say that we're only 50% created in God's image? That doesn't seem right. That makes like somehow we're less than. Because we say this, unlike animals, we have two parts, body and spirit or soul. Though our bodies are not derived from animals, they're made of the same stuff from which animals are made. The fact that animals are not in God's image, but we are, even though our bodies are similar, implies immediately that the image of God within us is not in our bodies, but in our spirit or soul. Now this is important. The image of God is not in your body. God, when we talk about this word, metaphysically, the essence of God is what? Spirit. Even more significantly, He is uncreated, divine, eternal spirit, and in His pure essence does not have any kind of form or content that can be seen or examined by us. Okay, so let's ask the question. If we are 100% created, and that we say that our bodies were created from the dirt or dust of the earth, and then God is not created, there's nothing in His essence that can be like the stuff that we witness here on this earth. Everything that He is, we cannot perceive. It's not created. Because if His essence were part of this stuff, then this stuff would be divine and eternal. Are you with me? Hope I'm making some sense. Let's just keep going here. So we talk about His pure essence does not have any kind of form or content that can be seen or examined by us. He alone possesses immortality and dwells in unapproachable light, who no man has seen or can see. 1 Timothy 6:16. He has no size or shape or appearance after which our bodies can be modeled. In Bible times, God occasionally appeared to human beings in certain forms. Right? when we say that God appears to human beings in certain forms, what's the theological term that we use? Theophany. But today we talked about one which is a little more specific, which we believe was a Christophany. All right, nice. Yeah. So God occasionally appeared to human beings in certain forms, including that of human beings, and will appear so to us in our final heaven, seated on a throne. See, we've talked about a little bit about this, and I think we'll get into this a little bit when we talk about later on about what happens about death and things like that. We'll get into a little bit of this about when the Bible talks about the heavenly throne room, and it talks about God seated on the throne, right? And who's at the right hand of God? Jesus. And what's happening in this realm? What other things are taking place that we've read about? Angels are there present, worshiping and serving, right? So that's what we get. So this is something that I've been working on in my thinking, is that what we have here is what Dr. Cottrell refers to as a permanent spiritual theophany, a permanent theophany that's taking place in that throne room, that God manifests in such a way in that place that he can be visibly seen in there. And that's a theophany. Because God in his pure essence says, what does the Bible say? Cannot be seen. So if something's going to be seen, then it has to be a theophany, just like what we've experienced in these things we read about, like the Christophany of the individual that was in the furnace we read about today. So in Bible times, God occasionally appeared to human beings, will appear so to us in our final heaven, seated on a throne. But God has appeared in other forms, called theophanies as well, such as smoke and fire, and even as a dove. All such appearances, including the man-shaped ones, are temporary and do not represent God's pure, immortal essence. Now, we talk about this idea of permanent and temporary. God would not be appearing in a throne room with angels unless that's post-creation. Right? Because that's tied to creation. Now, even Jesus' human body was made after the form of human beings, not patterned after something in God. Now, some people have unfortunately misunderstood this and have interpreted God as having not just the shape of a human body, but as actually existing as a physical body type. There's actually a major world religion that says something about God and appearing in a certain way, that talks about existing in a physical body type, that God in his essence exists in a physical body type, and that is the Mormon religion. Their founder, Joseph Smith, said, "The Father has a body of flesh and bones as tangible as man's." This is how Jesus came into existence as the Son of God. The Father came down and begat him. You understand what he's saying there? Without being too vulgar? The same as we do now, said Brigham Young, a successor of Smith. Now, we reject such ideas as heretical. Your body is not patterned after anything in God. The image of God applies only to your soul. So what does this mean then? To say that your soul is created in God's image. It means that we are patterned after his existence and nature as a person. Actually, as three persons, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. God is personal, and he has created us as persons with all the mental and spiritual capacities that he has, only on a finite rather than infinite level. This applies to our minds, to our wills, to our moral nature, to our ability to experience emotions, and to our ability to make plans and carry them out. So on your papers, we are patterned after his existence and nature as a person. This applies to our minds, our wills, our moral nature, our ability to experience emotions. It also means that we can exist in a community of persons with all kinds of interpersonal relationships. But most of all, it means that we can have a personal relationship with God Himself. We alone, of all earthly creatures, can consciously know God and relate to Him person to person. Alexander Campbell was wrong about the origin of the soul, but he was right about what the image of God means. He said this, "Man then was a companion of his Father and Creator, capable of admiring and adoring and enjoying God. Having made the earth for him, God was fully glorified in all His sublunary works, when then made man happy, grateful, and thankful to Himself. Man then, in his natural state, was not merely an animal, but an intellectual, moral, pure, and holy being." We affirm then that our identity as human beings includes the fact that God has created us in His own image. As human beings, we are indeed special and unique among all the living creatures on this earth. We reject any accusations of speciesism, a view similar to racism, that attacks the idea that human beings are superior to animals in any way. We can confidently affirm that we are superior to animals. The problem is that we so often do not live like it. What time is it? 7:31? Well, I think we need to stop.